The Mystara project is proud to present Part 14 of the Lore of Mystara series. In this video, we will focus on the year BC 1000 or approximations of this year, referenced as circa BC 1000. This time period, 2 millennia ago, is notable for three main phenomena. Firstly, the peak of Mystara's greatest empire since Thonia, the Nithian Empire. Secondly, Alphatian landfall, which introduced alien humans destined to form Mystara's next greatest empire. And finally, the start of the violent domino effect of humanoid overpopulation. Whilst the history of other worlds, and indeed the Hollow World, is outside the scope of this series, we will now touch on some events occurring on the world of Old Alphatia. In the War of Air and Fire, the followers of the most righteous College of Aerial Splendor had pushed the followers of the universal truth of fiery dominion into their citadels in the imperial capital, by using their experience and more even temperament. The fire wizards rose against Emperor Alphax and banished him, then sued for peace. But the bitter air wizards rejected the offer and combined all their power into a single huge windstorm spell of utter power that shattered the planet of Alphatia into small islands now known as the Star Kingdoms over a period of many years, an event known as the Scouring. Knowing their world was ruined, the air wizard leaders, through their Nithian contacts and guided by Razud, led a migration to a planet surrounded naturally by air, Mystara on the Prime Plane. The followers of the air took silk spiders and Zazonga with them. On Thormont VII, the followers of air, led by Kerethar, made landfall on the Green Lake River, on an island continent to the east of Norvold which reminded them of their homeland. They named this land Alphatia. This is Alphatian year, AY0 in the Alphatian calendar. They quickly conquered and enslaved the scattered Yanife peoples. Some Yanife escaped in canoes to the Yanivi island chain including Northrock Island. The Alphatians discovered that magic worked differently on Mystara, so they had to spend time relearning their magic. This delayed their use of skyships. The Alphatians were able to determine that Mystara shifted its axial rotation no more than 2,000 years ago, and that ice sheets receded from this island continent within the last 200 to 300 years. The Alphatians were forced to employ manual farming and construction, aided by magic, instead of relying completely on magic, due to their greatly reduced magical capability. Only the palaces and towers of the wizards were built completely by magic. Alarmingly, they discovered that the percentage of children born with magical ability had dropped from near 100% to only 50% on this world. The family that brought Zazonga with them started building hot houses to keep the plant alive on this new world. The Padfoots, pure Alphatian tiger shapeshifters, and the Woodwarders, pure Alphatian wolf shapeshifters, arrived with the Alphatian followers of air. The Alphatians adopted the Nithian calendar, but changed the names of the months and days. Kerethar and about 60 master wizards convened to set up a government on the site of a former Yanife village called Soonsval. They declared the empire shall be ruled by a hereditary emperor and a grand council of no more than 1,000 spellcasters of 36th level, to avoid a repeat of the abuse of absolute power by Emperor Alphax I. Kerethar I became the inaugural emperor of Alphatia on Mystara. Disliking Kerethar I's prejudice for pure Alphatians, the common Alphatian wizardess Arsla leads other common Alphatians southwest of the main Alphatian camp to create a settlement free of prejudice. She started building a city and her tower at the mouth of a river overlooking a gulf. She gave her name to the city. A walled town on a hill overlooking a bend in the Lynn River was built approximately 350 miles northeast of Soonsval. It was simply called Citadel. By BC 1000, the nomadic Genites had regressed to Stone Age barbarism. The Broken Lands have become overpopulated. Tribes moved to new territories in southeast Brune, displacing other tribes. Orcs and trolls settle the caverns and surface of the Dwarfgate Mountains region to the east. This land, including the southwestern foothills, comes to be referred to as the Orklands. Goblins, hobgoblins and kobolds also go there. Displaced, hungry orcs and goblins in the Altan Tepe Mountains attacked the Dengar lands during the reign of the 11th Dwarven king, Mystara III. They were defeated. Many headed south. These periodic unsuccessful attacks on Dengar through Sardal Pass lasted until BC 492, and ingrained a deep hatred between dwarfs and orcs. Outlying dwarven villages and fortifications were burnt, then rebuilt. Dwarven punitive expeditions raided the humanoid territories in response. Gnolls migrated from Nithia, through the Altan Tepes and the Black Peaks to the Kruth Mountains. They then invaded the Kruth lowlands of Hutaka. The Hutakans whipped up patriotic fervor in the Tralda to defend their lands against these beast men, then retreated to their valley, at the command of their high priestess, Bastet. The Gnoll invasion put an end to Tralda pirate raids on the coasts of the Deepland, and attacks on the gentle folk. The village of Radian was transported by the Immortals to the Hollow World, just prior to the Gnoll assault on its walls. The king of Krakatos was killed in battle against the Gnolls, early in the war. Lord High General Androsa won many battles leading the forces of Marilanev, and demonstrated great courage. Most of the Tralda living north of the Black Peaks fled to the north, but were slaughtered in the Aucklands with few survivors. A few Hutakans were blocked from retreating to their valley by the Tralda and Gnollish forces. Instead they fled to all parts of Brune, eventually breeding with other canine species to produce lupins, except for the children of Fla, who fled to the Konamtali savanna. Certain the beast men would overrun his people, King Milen of Marilanev set sail on inadequate boats with the majority of his people in search of the southern continent that a halfling adventurer had told him about. Wild weather sunk many ships and carried the remainder across the entire Sea of Dread to Devania. The flotilla's voyage across the Sea of Dread was also hounded by an enormous voracious fish which claimed many Tralda. King Milen did not survive the voyage and left no heirs. Some speculated that he was murdered by General Androsa. The surviving Tralda, circa 70%, landed on Devania's jungle coast, at the mouth of the river northwest of the Manakapuru territory. They survived by hunting and fishing. However, the man-eating fish continued to attack them, so they followed their Lord High General, Androsa, upriver until the fish attacks ceased. There they settled in the hills and grasslands of desolation, but were soon forced southwards into the jungle-cloaked hills after being attacked by humanoids. The terrain reminded them of their homeland, as they slowly made their way through the trees. They finally settled. Open councils were held, and several nobles were elected to represent various factions of the populace. These men devised a democratic system of government consisting of two ruling bodies, the Senate and the Emperor. These same men were elected by popular vote and formed the first Senate. They in turn elected the first Emperor, Androsa I. Thus, the Mylenian Empire was born in name, but not yet in worthiness. Back in the central Tralda lands, Halav, a weaponsmith, took the throne as King of Lav, replacing a less resolute leader. He organized armed resistance, via guerrilla warfare, against the invading beast men with his fiancée, Queen Petra of Krakatos, a warrior cleric, and Zirchef, a wizard and huntsman. Halav was advised by the mage Oitulef, who created a crystal ball with telepathy, known as Oitulef's Eye. Together, they led the troops to hold the line at the Volaga River. To the northeast, the Nithian Empire had reached its zenith, featuring monumental architecture, large urban complexes in the river Nithia Delta, the greatest extent of its territorial holdings, and development of sophisticated arts and culture. Nithian seafarers discovered the western Isles of Dread. Nithia settled and named them the Colony Isles. They enslaved the native Makai, but ignored the inland Malfegi lizard men. They brought black goblin slaves and plantation-style agriculture to the Isles. Cattle brought by the Nithians to the Colony Isles contained a tick-like parasite that was fatal to the Malfegi lizard men. An entire lair was wiped out and the survivors spread the disease to the next lair. Lizard men numbers began to decline. They believed the disease was the wrath of an angry immortal. The mainland coastal northern reaches were conquered, but with minimal interference to the local culture. Some trading posts were established along the fjords and rivers, and some Antalians were enslaved. Formal spellcasting was introduced. Hearing of the coastal Tralda's exodus to Devania, Nithia decided to set up a colony on the northern coast of the southern continent. Northern Reach's slaves were shipped to Harbour Town, and from there to the new colony, which was the southernmost extent that the empire reached. Interestingly, they were not harassed by giant voracious fish. Nithian expansion into the lands of the Toralai and Tralda was prevented by hostile humanoid tribes in the Altan Tepes. Tangor naval explorers founded the islands of Nuar, Tuar, Pu'ir, Ku'ir and Dwarir, between Devania and the island of Ochali. Settlement soon followed. Nuar means western home in Tanagoro. The settlers called themselves the Nuari. Nether tribes migrated from the Eruption Basin through the Kenaran River Valley to the forested pass of Brazil. Displaced by the Nolish migration, orcs fled the Black Spires and invaded the deep land. Fearing for the survival of the gentle folk elves, the immortals transported them to the Hollow World. Note Alphatia was not yet immortal at this stage, so she could not have been responsible for transporting the gentle folk to the Hollow World. Koryis was immortal, and may have been aware of the gentle folk. With the end of the gentle folk, the Hin began to call the deep land, Hinhome, or Laura. The Hin were then conquered and enslaved by the orcs. After fighting among themselves, Othrong emerged as leader of the orcs, establishing the realm of Othrong with his capital at Castlebone. Hin slaves were set to work on farms, road-building gangs and clearing forests. Trolls who took a wrong turn and got lost in southeast Brune Caverns finally emerged on the west coast of the continent of Alphatia and settled there. The Grugrak and other Knoll tribes fled Nithia westward, via the Broken Lands, to the Amsarak Mountains. Some, tired of constantly fighting for territory, decided to settle the Asanda Valley, and agreed to work as unskilled laborers to the Sindis for reliable food and shelter. Others chose freedom and moved on to the Plain of Fire. Broken Lands goblins and hobgoblins migrated to the Black Mountains via the Amsarak Mountains and lands to the north of the Plain of Fire. Trolls, bugbears and kobolds from the Broken Lands migrated through the Kurish Massif, attacking Sind's northern border. Humanoid migrations pressured the Red Orcs to renew their attacks on Sind. The Urduks were not as enthusiastic to assist the Sindis, as they were no longer threatened by the Orcs. The Sindis began to despise Urduvanas, and intermarriage became illegal. The Urduks were relegated to the lower castes and most wandered further into the grasslands, away from the Sindis. The three sister crones of Christic, Maquisa, Bithydia and Chisandri were born in Norvold. The Fadorn, Karelia, lived on the Shining Isle, high above the Windy Steppe, by this time. 1,000 years after its destruction, the mind gem of Morag reformed. This concludes our look at the year BC 1000. An important time in Mystara's history, marking the zenith of the Nithian Empire, the beginnings of the Alphatian and Mylenian empires, and widespread violence and dislocation from humanoid overpopulation in the Broken Lands.